Hello, time travelers. So, say you want to get into all this fancy open source AI stuff like Stable Diffusion, but your computer hardware just won't run it. Well, you're in the right place because I'm going to teach you about hardware. In this video, I'm going to show you how nVidia is saving the best of its GPUs for corporations and cutting you short. But I'm also going to tell you how to get a computer up and going for cheap that has what it needs to run this stuff.
And it gives us 144 terabytes of memory that every GPU can see.
This is my look of disapproval. nVidia is peddling hardware to consumers and not being 100% honest. Well, what I mean is they market their hardware in weird ways sometimes.
Okay, this is our brand new. Right here, you're looking at an Ada GPU running ray tracing and artificial intelligence at 60 frames a second. Our partners here in Taiwan are producing both of these products in very, very large productions, and I'm really excited about them. Thank you very much.
That's Jensen, the CEO of nVidia. In his right hand, he has a 4060 Ti, which only has 8 gigabytes of VRAM. He says both of these are now in production, but he doesn't say what model GPU is in that laptop. The 4060 Ti has 8 gigabytes of VRAM and has an MSRP of $399. So just to compare real quick, I couldn't find the MSRP of an RX 6700, but I can get the cheapest new at $269, and sorry, as of the filming of this video, and a used price $254. If I go back down to what I found for the 4060 Ti, it's $399 and $319. But the 6700 has 10 gigabytes of VRAM. But before you go add a 6700 XT to your shopping cart, you need to know that most of everything runs on nVidia. So hold on. One of the things VRAM helps you with is more complex game textures when, you're gaming and the images that are wrapped around the wireframe models that make up objects in the environment of the game. But this video's focus is more on AI stuff. It will help you with your gaming experience because I'm going to teach you how VRAM works in your GPU.
One of the things people got outright angry about when the now canceled RTX 4080 12 gig from nVidia was announced was the memory bandwidth, a spec you might also see described as bus width or something similar. But why exactly is it so important?
We aren't going to do a deep dive on how all of this works, but you do need to have a basic understanding to help you with your AI workloads.
The memory bus connects the GPU itself to your card's video memory or VRAM. The basic way a graphics card works is that the GPU, which you can see here, acts upon data stored in the VRAM, which are these little modules, to generate the images you see on your screen.
Basically, bandwidth is how much room that the memory has to move in and out of the VRAM. So imagine a hallway, right? And it's only so wide. That's how I always think of bandwidth, and people standing shoulder to shoulder trying to walk through that hallway. One end of that hallway is the GPU core, and the other end is the VRAM. So how much room do you have to move stuff back and forth? By the way, all the videos that I've sourced today will be linked in the description below for you to watch later. Yes, I know Linus Tech Tips got in trouble about accuracy in their videos recently. I actually noticed this back in 2014, but I watched these particular videos and they're not doing benchmarks and stuff. They're just giving you technical knowledge about GPUs. I first learned about VRAM and bandwidth and all that when I got into cryptocurrency mining in 2017. And at the time, there were two different versions of the GTX 1060. There was a 3 gig and the 6 gig. And the DAG, which, how do you say that? What is DAG in GPU mining? It's directed acyclic graph. I don't know. It's the math problem that your GPU has to solve in order to help the blockchain. And they pay you a tiny bit for it. The memory bandwidth on these two was the same, but since the DAG was 4 gigabytes in size, it wouldn't work with this GPU. So I got that one. And then later on, a couple years later, the 1660 Super came out, and it outperformed the 1080 Ti in some games. Because you look at the memory clock on the 1080 Ti, it's 1376 compared to 1750 megahertz. The bandwidth on the 1080 Ti was more, which is a good pairing for the 11 gigs of VRAM. But look, this 6 gigs of VRAM with 336 gigabytes of bandwidth versus the 6 gigabytes of VRAM on the 1060 with only 192 gigabytes of bandwidth. And I got better performance with mining with that GPU. But in mining, you're cramming the DAG into the VRAM. In AI stuff, you're cramming tensors in the VRAM. And tensors is like a group of vectors, and vectors is like a three-dimensional, well, multi-dimensional connected dots game that is able to take your prompt and follow one dot to the next dot to generate something for you, whether that's a text like in ChatGPT or an image with stable diffusion. Now that you understand a little bit about memory and bandwidth, let me explain to you why you need a GPU instead of using an online service. By the way, this is future me doing editing, and I had to do these inserts because AMD came out with 2 GPUs after the initial recording. Anyways, the reasons why you want to have your own GPU to run AI stuff. Number 1 is privacy. You don't need some unknown organization or employees doing shenanigans with your data. We've already discussed this on this channel, and we all know about this. Number 2, you can fix your prompts instead of images not coming out the way you expect they do and you can't tell why. It's easier if you could see your prompt next to the image and go, oh, that's a little too NSFW because of this word. Whatever, I'll just put a different word. And you could generate more stuff for less money because you just have to buy the GPU and run the electric bill. But with ChatGPT, what you're doing is not private and it's biased. It won't let you do certain things, and it's going to bias towards one end. With installing ChatGPT is what's called a large language model, and there are large language models you can install on your computer and run and set up your own biases and train your own models on them or whatever. But the key point is you got to have it running on your computer and not rely on a web server. But in order to get control over what your AI is doing and have privacy and know what the frick is going on, because what if there's an error and you can't figure it out? Online, you can't tell. For example, if you're using Midjourney and it's not generating what you want, you can't tell. You just think you have a bad prompt. Well, on Stable Diffusion, when it spits out something that's like, for example, has something that's biased against in Midjourney, like weapons or showing body parts you shouldn't be showing, you can go, oh, snap, somewhere in my prompt, I gotta change some wording around or put something into the negative prompt. You can't do that if a system is biased to block those kinds of things because you won't even be able to tell that's what's happening. So SDXL came out, and in order to run just the standard SDXL within a reasonable amount of time to generate images, I have to use my GPU with 24 gigs of VRAM, and that's the RTX 3090. I'm able to get somewhat reasonable generation times on my 12 gigabyte VRAM GPU on another system, and that card's a 3080 Ti. I did testing on an 8 gigabyte card, which is a 3070, and it took 15 minutes to do each step for image generation for one picture. Update. That was before the 1.6.0 update from Automatic 11.11, and it runs significantly faster now. Still a lot slower on an 8 gigabyte card though. You also have to keep in mind that in the future, when new AI stuff comes out, that stuff is going to use more memory than the current stuff. nVidia doesn't care about gamers. Well, not as much as it does about cloud computing AI stuff.
The higher the resolution, texture quality settings, or VFX settings, the more VRAM your GPU will use, which is why you sometimes see people criticize nVidia or AMD when they pair a powerful GPU that could otherwise run games on high settings with an insufficient amount of VRAM.
Remember the hallway analogy I said earlier? But you'll see why nVidia did this in the video. It's because nVidia doesn't want you to have that much VRAM for that low of a price. I have quite a few GPUs from cryptocurrency mining over the years, so I'm pretty familiar with different specs on the GPUs and what they mean, which is what I copied most of this data off of. There's way more columns than I look at, but I'm sharing this particular spreadsheet with y'all. It'll be linked in the description if you want to look at it and geek out over these numbers. But I'm not saying you have to do like the normal cryptocurrency miner person and go through 50 plus GPUs and go, oh, well, I happen to have this GPU over here, which I'm not mining right now, so let's do some AI on it. No, I'm just showing you how to do some research and giving you the spreadsheet to get you started. Some people are afraid that AI is going to steal all of our jobs, but they're wrong. Jobs that use AI are going to replace jobs that don't use AI. And if I can play around with AI on my computer and make some cool images while I learn how this stuff works, all the better. Then I'm going to be more marketable to some IT job in the future. So where's all the VRAM going? I'm about to show you, and you might get upset.
Well, this is how accelerated computing works. This is accelerated computing used for large language models. For large language models, basically the core of generative AI. This example is a $10 million server, and we costed everything. We costed the processor, we costed all the chips, we costed all the network, we costed literally everything. And so $10 million gets you nearly 1,000 CPU servers.
Yay!
What Jensen is doing here is selling a cheaper solution for server-based or cloud-based AI.
This is before, and this is after, and this is...
This is my look of sarcasm. nVidia is putting VRAM you need in your gaming GPU into special cards to use in these data center server clusters because they're pitching them to AI services as a much more cost-effective solution. nVidia doesn't make its VRAM. SK Hynix and Samsung do. And those companies have other customers. So, nVidia has to focus the production time that they pay for at these manufacturers mostly towards their corporate customer products and their Halo products like the 4090, even though VRAM is relatively cheap. Check out this Tom's Hardware article, obviously linked in the descriptables below. It says, due to the rapidly dropping demand for graphics cards in recent quarters, coupled with the end of the component shortages of 2021, prices on GDDR6 memory have plummeted. So the price of memory has gone down. As noticed by the 3dcenter.org, spot prices of GDDR6 decreased to less than a quarter of what they once were during the past 1.5 years. At present, 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 now cost $27 on the spot market. That certainly raises the question of why both AMD and nVidia have opted not to install 16 gigabytes or more memory on many of the best graphics cards. I'm sensing a little bias here towards nVidia because a lot of AMD's GPUs do have 16 gigs of memory. I have a 6800 in slot number 1 on a test machine and a 3070 in slot number 2 because I was testing for y'all to see that. What if you already have a good AMD gaming GPU and you want to grab a NVIDIA GPU with high VRAM to run all the CUDA stuff that has to have NVIDIA? It's easy. You don't even have to change anything about how you install your AI stuff. It just ignores the AMD GPU and uses the NVIDIA one. So this may sound like a tangent, but it's not. Let's come back around to a good point. When I got the RTX 3090, it was not mining very well. And long story short, it turns out it was because half of the VRAM is on the backplate instead of where the heatsink is. So it was overheating. And I found out that NVIDIA plays it fast and loose with VRAM to make themselves appear to be more competitive than AMD. And that was the first consumer card they had with GDDR6X. And they fixed the problem with the 3090 Ti by putting all the VRAM on the heatsink side. Do you still need more convincing that NVIDIA only puts a lot of VRAM in their Halo GPUs?
Why don't we take a look at what it really looks like? Play, please.
That's where all your VRAM is going.
And it gives us 144 terabytes of memory that every GPU can see.
One of the big obstacles is that you cannot upgrade the VRAM in your GPU.
Upgrading your main system memory is a piece of cake. You buy a DDR module, you slot it in, and enjoy. But have you ever wondered why you can't do that with video RAM on your graphics card? This is a fair question, especially considering how much VRAM modern games can require. You see, VRAM stores textures and other visual assets that the GPU processes in order to render all those lovely frames that appear on your screen.
So what do you do if you need more VRAM?
But there's only so much room on a typical graphics card. So instead of having a big old socket, like motherboards do, manufacturers instead solder VRAM modules directly to the graphics card PCB to save space. And some types of video memory, such as HBM, are actually combined on the same package as the GPU itself.
So the VRAM is soldered to the PCB. And even if you look at some GPUs and they have open spots where you can tell there's no VRAM there, you can't just solder on VRAM without changing other components on the board that manage the data traffic and the voltage. And then on top of that, in order to address that VRAM, you might need a custom BIOS, which nVidia locks down so you can't flash it. So, about AMD versus nVidia in VRAM amount.
So why is nVidia so stubborn and so stingy? Why do they insist on offering less video RAM than their competitors? Well, there is a sinister reason behind this. It has everything to do with market domination and customer manipulation. nVidia wants to push their consumers to buy high-end GPUs like the RTX 4090 and RTX 4080.
The RX 7800 XT costs $499. Now, one of the things AMD would typically do in the past, I'm starting with pricing because realistically, that is the most important thing people care about. It's like, okay, it can game, it can do this, it can do that, whatever, might cook me dinner. Can it be affordable for me?
The RX 7700 XT from AMD has 12 gigabytes of memory. It targets the 4060 Ti in performance, which has 8 gigabytes of VRAM.
But it's a 192-bit memory bus, and it's 12 gigabytes of memory. So if you remember, the 4060 Ti has a 16 gigabyte model, which is only available through AICs, which are like MSI, Gigabyte, ASRock, not ASRock, but Aorus and Asus and all of them, whereas the Founders Edition card is only an 8 gigabyte card.
I have the video from JayzTwCents linked in the description, obviously. Watch that if you're thinking of buying one of the new AMD cards for gaming. But this video is about AI, and I'm finally going to get around to it. I recommend buying the RTX 3060 12 gigabyte model. Maybe you're going to build a machine that's got a great AMD GPU for gaming in slot 1 and then the 3060 12 gig in slot 2. The AMD RX 7700 XT MSRP at $449 versus the 470 Ti at $799. What? That's the price comparison? Really?
So if you wanted to price comparison these cards, to be fair, if we're looking at price as the ultimate deciding factor, then you should be comparing a 4060 Ti 16 gig to a 7800 XT because they're the same price.
So I'm going to freeze the video here where JayzTwCents is showing the slide from AMD. So AMD is comparing the 4060 Ti from nVidia with the RX 7700 XT that they have coming out, and the 4070 from nVidia with their RX 7800 XT. So look at the bandwidth we were talking about earlier. 288 versus 432. That's nuts. 504 versus 624. And the MSRP of the 7800 XT is only $50 more than the 7700 XT. There is a 16 gigabyte version of the 4060 Ti, but it might be harder to find. Here's eBay, just as an example, and I've got 4060 Ti 16 gig in there. I've got it sorted for the lowest price first, and it's all the buy it nows. $415. I checked a couple days ago and it saw a cheaper one, but watch this. If I go up here and I change it to 3060, take the Ti and a plus out and change that to a 12 gig. And the reason why I change it in the URL is so I don't have to change all my filters. Ignore the parts only ones, parts only. I should have put the filter. All right, fixed it. Here's the filter. New, open box, and used. See, these are listing at $200, but I personally don't buy stock photo ones. 180 plus 2445. That's just a quick example of how cheap this card is. Check out this article from Tech Power Up. AMD plays the VRAM card against nVidia. In a blog post, AMD has pulled the VRAM card against nVidia, telling potential graphics card buyers that they should consider AMD over nVidia because current and future games will require more VRAM, especially at higher resolution. Blah, 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 blah. The Last of Us Part 1 and Hogwarts Legacy, all games that use over 11 gigabytes of VRAM or more. So yeah, you want to have 12. So since I am sharing this spreadsheet with you guys, I've highlighted the nVidia GPUs that have 12 or more gigabytes of VRAM. And then I've done math over here to divide the cost of buying it by how much VRAM it has. So you can see which one has the cheapest VRAM. It's like the 1080 Ti at 1273 per gig of VRAM. And here's the 3060 12 gig at 1667. Same price as a 2060 12 gig, but you're going to get a lot better gaming performance if that's your only GPU. And you want a lower tier card, the 3060 is a whole generation newer. Check out this Tom's Hardware article. Evidence shows AI-driven companies are buying up gaming GPUs. And this is actually a picture that somebody tweeted, and it's a guy by the name of George Hotz. His online handle is GeoHotz. He's the guy that got in trouble for hacking the PS3 and letting people install homebrew software on it. He runs a company right now called comma.ai, which allows you to put an Android device in a lot of cars to give them self-driving capabilities. I think he's a pretty cool dude, and he must be using DirectML, or he wrote his own software, but he's using AMD GPUs in his AI workloads on his servers. I wouldn't put it past him to write his own script. He's one of the first person to jailbreak a Tesla, I think. But it's an example of a corporation or organization buying up consumer cards, and that makes me do my look of disapproval. All right, now for some predictions and questions about the future. So my prediction is that if you grab an RTX 3060 12 gig and you start using it for AI stuff now, even if you don't keep using it in your main computer rig, maybe you hand it down to another rig that's only for your AI stuff or whatever you do, you'll still be using it for up to another 6 years or so. I know within another 3 or 4 years, there's going to be another crypto bull market. I know at that time, it's going to be almost impossible to get one. That's if people are still mining. People are still mining now, and we're in a bear market. See what I mean? And check out this AI solutions thing from AMD. It says AI is defining the next era of computing, and this is just the beginning. We see the benefits of AI every day, enabling medical research, curbing credit card fraud, reducing congestion in cities, or simply making life easier. They said it's just beginning. We've been using AI for a long time. Like, how do you think Google Maps works? Or voice to text when you're talking into your phone and it's typing out what you're saying. It's been around for a while. What they mean by this is just the beginning is that AMD is just now getting into it. So I predict it's going to take them another 6 to 15 years to be competitive with NVIDIA, even if they ever get there. Tell me what you think. Do you think AMD is going to be able to compete with NVIDIA in the server space for AI stuff? AMD was able to compete with Intel with their Ryzen CPU and give Intel literally a run for their money. But then again, if you knew the history about AMD, historically, they usually lead. They started out by having a CPU that was faster than the Intel one, and you could drop it into an Intel socket. And I know they were the first with a 64-bit processor, and they were also the first with the dual-core processor and with the quad-core, blah, 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 blah. But those are CPUs, and GPUs are a completely different animal. AMD bought out a company called ATI, and they've been improving that company by loads, but they still haven't been able to ever really beat NVIDIA at everything. But they have made NVIDIA more competitive and make better products for us. Now we're going to talk about the prices for VRAM. I mentioned it earlier, and I put it in these columns over here in the spreadsheet. For the new prices, I looked up the cheapest new cards on Newegg and Amazon, but I left out prices of cards that only had one left in stock, or only just a few, like 5. I left out the ones that were refurbished, or looked like they were from sketchy Chinese knockoffs, or had very few reviews, or ones that didn't have a cooler included. For used cards, I looked at Buy It Now auctions on eBay.com and Java.gg. I avoided as-is auctions and parts or not working ones. Keep in mind that the prices I'm showing you may change over time. I put them in at the time when I was doing the research for this video, and all prices do not include shipping costs. Now, you need NVIDIA for most AI stuff because NVIDIA has CUDA. When did CUDA API come out? API stands for Advanced Programming Interface, and that came out in February of 2007. So they got a huge head start on AMD. So check this out. This page is talking about Torch, which is another thing that you need to run AI stuff. Torch is a deep learning framework with wide support for machine learning algorithms. It's open source, simple to use, and efficient, thanks to the easy and fast scripting language, blah, 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 and CUDA implementation. Of course, they made it open source. They're not going to charge you for the software because they're already charging you for the hardware. It also runs up to 70% faster on the latest NVIDIA Pascal GPUs, so you can now train networks in hours instead of days. So what's CUDA? Even AI can't find this page. Derper derper. What is CUDA? CUDA is software layer that gives you direct access to the GPU's virtual instruction set and parallel NVIDIA CUDA. You need at least 8 gigabytes of VRAM right now, but 12 will help you do more. SDXL just came out, and if you try to generate an image with a GPU that has 8 gigabytes of VRAM, it takes 15 minutes just to generate the image. It's much more reasonable on a 12 gigabyte GPU. It's also going to help you as new stuff comes out, because AI stuff is just coming out so fast. It's just going to keep using more VRAM. And there's command line arguments for stable diffusion like XFormers, medium VRAM, or low VRAM that you can use, and other optimizers that they'll be coming out with later in the future. These are ways to optimize the compute in these systems to use less VRAM, but they generate much less stuff and it takes longer. Right now, I have the 3070 and I'm testing it in a computer on my kitchen table, so I could tell you how bad it does at this stuff. So now in this section of the video, I'm going to be showing you guys some options for computer hardware. You don't have to choose these specific options, but I'm using a website called PC Parts Picker where I can make a parts list and share them with you guys. I got AI Compute Starter, AI Compute Starter Cheap, and AI Compute Starter Expensive. So I'm going to start with the cheap one and look at the total. It's about that much. You know, it's not that bad. You can actually go cheaper than this. For all of these parts lists, I'm not including the price of keyboard, mouse, monitor, or a copy of Windows. My son and I use Kingwin, and I'll have it linked in the description, obviously. So Windows 10 Home, 18 bucks, you know. I'm opening up these parts in a new tab so I can show you a little bit about each one. Ryzen 3 4100 is a good CPU, get you going. It does not have built-in graphics, so it's going to save you money there. It includes a cooler. If you're going to be doing gaming or other stuff, you're going to want to get another cooler. But this is just to get you started. And a B450 chipset on a motherboard is going to give you enough stuff to where you can install a GPU right here. Now this particular motherboard, there's only enough room for one GPU, so you want to keep that in mind. Memory, you're going to want to have 16 gigs of memory. You don't run it with 8. It's just terrible that way. Here's a cheap SSD. 512 is enough for just getting started in AI. You're going to need more capacity than that if you're going to be downloading like a few dozen models or training a whole bunch of stuff and just going nuts. And here's a brand new MSI RTX 3060 12 gig, and you can get it for as low as $285 at the time of filming this video. And here's a case that I found. You want something with a lot of airflow, and how you spot that is if you can look carefully, you can see there's grills in the front, so you can install fans to pull air through the case. The power supply, I chose a 600 watt. You don't really need that much, but a power supply is the hardest thing to upgrade in the future, and you kind of want to give yourself some room. I'll have this Cooler Master power supply calculator linked in the description. You can basically just put in all the parts in here for what your build is going to be and see how many watts of power it's going to pull. But I would add a couple hundred watts to that just to start with, just in case the power of your GPU peaks suddenly, because if you go to Tech Power Up and just Google it like this, Tech Power Up RTX 3060 12 gigabyte, and then when it comes up, click that to load that up. You can get all the specs, like when I was filling out this spreadsheet, that's where I got all these specs, was from Tech Power Up. Scroll down to this big paragraph of blah-bitty blah, and this is where it says how many watts maximum that GPU uses. Your motherboard, at the most, will use 200 or 250. So let's say it's 250, I'm just going to exaggerate it a little bit, plus 170, that's 320. That's more than that's saying. So I have it add a couple hundred, and that gets you to 500 watts. And then I add another 100 in case I want to upgrade something else later. And now here's the middle of the ground build that I did, the Compute Starter. Ryzen 5 5600, it's going to give you more performance. Again, it's got a cooler that comes with it. And here's a motherboard that you might be able to get 2 GPUs on. Probably not because of how they're spaced. You can look at other motherboards, and you want this long slot to be higher up with 1, 2 spots in between of the shorter ones so that you can put a second GPU on the bottom. That's if you're planning on doing that. If you're not planning on having 2 GPUs, this board would be fine. 16 gigs of memory again, but it's faster speed this time with some heat spreaders. A better SSD that's going to give you more performance. That's a middle tier one. And a different RTX 3060 12 gig. A computer case that has even more airflow, if you see that. Looks like that with the case all put together. And another 600 watt power supply. Now let's look at the more expensive one. Ryzen 5 7600. Now this one is on a different chipset and a different socket. The Ryzen came out and it was AM4 was the name of the socket, and AM5 just came out. So it's going to use different memory too. You use DDR4 with the AM4 and DDR5 with the AM5. This board is definitely going to help you have multiple things. Like there's an M.2 SSD slot right there and another M.2 right there. You can put one GPU there and another one there. And there's 64 gigs of memory. And check out this hard drive. I actually bought a few of these after I got one to replace a hard drive that I had that was failing in my rig. This is the first hard drive I've ever seen that had a spec called average mean time between failures. And it was super low. It's a great price. $150 for 4 terabytes, and you could put tons and tons of different AI whatsits and all their models on there. And there's the 980 Pro SSD from Samsung. It's a high performance SSD. And then this time I put in a higher performing card than the RTX 3060 12 gig, which is the 3080 Ti. And here's a really popular case. It's got tons of airflow from Corsair. I chose the computer case in the expensive computer build because it has airflow over the hard drive. If you're planning on using a hard drive at any point in the future, you're going to need a case like this. Here's a pic showing the fan that will cool the hard drive bays, and here's where the hard drive bays are, and here's the airflow. More on this in a few moments. And a Corsair 850 watt power supply that's modular. It's easier to unplug and replug cables and upgrade or move things around if you need to. Feel free to use PC Part Picker to browse your favorite brands and virtually build your PC. I got a couple recommendations though. If you plan on getting a hard drive now or in the future, you want to look at the different pictures of the case and taking it apart so that you have airflow over the hard drive caddies. So here's this picture showing the hard drive caddies are right here, right? And if I go back to the front, you could see there's a grill here, but will a fan go there? I'm not sure if I can tell. I'm just giving you some quick ideas. The problem is that higher capacity hard drives fail more because of the spinning platter creating heat where the motor is. And if you have fans directly cooling your hard drive, that's less likely. Another thing is you probably don't want to get a micro ATX build, like one of those smaller computers that's like this, because you're not going to be able to fit as much in there. Some of them can fit like a full-length GPU, but a lot of the full-length GPUs these days are longer than 300 millimeters. And you have to check when you're buying a GPU in the specs how long it is, and then you have to check the specs on the case to see how long of a GPU it will fit in there. Hey time travelers, it's Future Me, and I forgot to mention my buddy on YouTube, Jared's Journey, because while I was writing the script for this video, he came out with a video comparing the RTX 3060 12 gig versus the 3090. This is a guy that's helped me on a couple of AI things that are not stable diffusion. They're tools that I use to make my videos. You'll be seeing some of the results of those AI tools in my upcoming sketch videos.
Jumping into a quick little comparison for the speed of image generation, on the left side here you will have the 4090 generating images, and on the right side here you will have the 3060 generating images. This is with Stable Diffusion 1.5 using the Maynard Mix model, and this is with a width and height of 512, so it's going to be a square image.
So I'm going to have that linked in the descriptables below, obviously, for you guys to check out. I recommend you watch the whole video so you could see how useful the RTX 3060 12 gig is. But that's it for this video. Thank you for watching all of this, and I hope I've taught you something, and I hope I saved you money, and I hope I helped you find what kind of hardware you need for your specific situation. So why don't you tell me in the comments what kind of rig you're running with your AI stuff, and whether or not you're running AI stuff yet, what you're planning on doing in the future, because this is all very interesting to me. If you're already running Stable Diffusion, I recommend watching this video over here, which is a bunch of tricks I figured out in Stable Diffusion, and then whatever YouTube thinks is best is over there, and then you can subscribe to the channel down here. Thanks for watching, and make sure you're subscribed because I've got some more stuff coming out.